evaluation. So, okay, the query letters turned your head. You're 100% on board. You turn to the manuscript now, and you're going to give the manuscript a few lines, depending, I assume, on the description. If it was a really captivating description, maybe even a full page, right? Possibly. So, what does an author have to do to win you over in the short amount of time that they have to do it?
Have like really great writing. Like I said, I'm not always 100% sure what I'm looking for because I'm not going to know it until I see it. Especially because my emphasis is really on getting things that really surprise me and, are innovative and whatnot. So it really is having that really hooky writing, having, very active writing, very actionable or action-ish writing, interesting characters, really strong voice. I think, or just even just wanting to make me to read more. So if you have a really fantastic premise and the writing isn't quite there yet, or I'm seeing things about it that I want to fix, if the plot is so compelling that I just am gonna gloss over all of that and keep going, that is also a big plus.
So like 2 spelling errors on page 1, a long description to nowhere, but by God, we're opening in an amazing place. You'll keep going and just make me do a revision later.
Yeah, like if I really fantastic premise I'm really, really excited about, and also the mistakes that I see are things that I can edit. So if I can see the mistakes that I think you're making, or things that I want to change and say, okay, I know that I would cut that and I would start this here and I would just move these things around. If there's something that I think that I can do with it, then yes. If I'm looking at it and I'm like, I am not quite sure how that would fit together, then less so.
Okay. So 100 to 200 potential queries a week. What are the most common mistakes that you're seeing that rule authors out immediately?
Well, not research. So I am kind of open to I'm willing to be convinced to be into sort of any genre. But there are some like hard no's, like fiction picture books is something we talked about. Also like sort of medical and illness memoirs are just not my thing. So if people aren't doing their research on things like that, that's not a no. Projects that are too similar to ones I already represent, I think that's actually something that a lot of authors think is a good thing. That, because I rep the Storm Crow, I would also be interested in another fantasy with elemental crows. But in reality, like, I do love the Storm Crow and I think it's a great book, but I don't want another one because I just sold that one. And I'm not going to be able to do it again. So I think research in terms of that as well. Anything else that's like no, I mean, including the idea, right, that their writing is like on point and that I'm loving it. But I think those are the only things I can think of.
Gotcha. So take a look at your client list. Make sure that you haven't sold anything that's too similar to what they've got. Are there any things that are just automatic pet peeves? Like if I start my story with "I woke up, I was a redhead in a middle grade novel, and my parents were dead." Things like that immediately turn you off.
Oh, like very internal, sort of like angsty dialogue, which I think is probably a little bit more common for YA. I'm not a huge fan of opening with things like that. Also, things where I have to play catch up, where you're talking about people and relationships that you haven't yet explained to me or even hinted at in some way. Because a lot of times, especially when you're starting a novel off, you can just give someone a very broad sketch and they'll understand exactly what you're talking about. Like for instance, sisters who don't get along. I think that's a relationship that most people, just as soon as you say that, can kind of sketch out what that looks like in their head. But if I don't even have those sketches, if it's just talking about people doing things and I don't know who that person is and I just feel lost or like I'm starting in the wrong part of the story, that's a pet peeve of mine. I don't like the 70s.
All right. Just the entire decade out.
Yeah, no, it's not a big thing for me. Although actually, I did read a partial somewhat recently that was set in the 70s and I thought I wouldn't like, but I actually did. And it ended up not being quite enough to fall in love with it, but I was surprised that I was okay with that. In general, setting in the 70s is like a slight tick against for me, and that's just a personal bias thing.
What is it about the 70s you think that repels you?
Not repels, that's too strong a word. But I think when I was talking about sort of like being able to call something automatically, I think a lot of times when I read stories set in the 60s or the 70s, it's always like this good suburban kid who's super naive, who got drafted into Vietnam, or like met somebody who was a hippie and did tons of drugs and, you know, goes through this revolution in terms of who he is. And I don't know. That's not necessarily confined to the 60s and 70s, but that's something that I see in a lot of stories that take place in that era. So it's just not my cup of tea.
I'm going to write you a fiction picture book, a fiction picture book set in 1965 about somebody dying from cancer that's cured by ancient aliens. And then I've got you. I think I can win you over.
Oh, good attention, yeah.
So how many clients are you accepting on a yearly basis, would you say? Accepting, taking on, whatever the right term is.
No, I don't know, because I'm not really thinking in terms of years. It really is, so I'm really almost looking for a reason to say no to something, just because I have a fairly full list. I have a lot on my plate right now, and so I really want to be not forced, because it's not like I'm being like dragged against my will, but almost like forced to be like, oh, this is so like wonderful and awesome. I have to take it. This has to be mine. So I mean, in terms of like yearly additions, I'm not sure. Maybe ideally like one or two, but sometimes that ends up being something that I'm like, I said one or two, but I'm gonna take on these two people too. So it really just kind of depends.
So one or two, would it be fair to say probably no more than 10?
Definitely under 10.
Okay, I'm just trying to get some idea of what the ratio is between the 100 to 200 queries per week versus under 10 clients that you're going to offer representation to for the whole year. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I kind of go into a year maybe saying like, okay, I probably can't take on any more than like, 3 or 4 people this year, because I got a lot on my plate. I know I got to do these things. That's probably as much as I can do and still be like a functional human that has hobbies. But if I come across 6 things that I really, really love, I'm not gonna like not take on, 3 of them. I'm gonna do it and just, never see my husband.
And so, other than being married, what hobbies are you carving time out for? And is agenting at this point your sole job?
Mm-hmm. Well, and audio rights agency, but it's all within LDLA, so I kind of consider it the same thing. Other hobbies are, well, I don't know, are cats hobbies?
Sure.
Okay, then cats. I love, as anyone who follows me knows, because I have way too many cat photos and things on my professional like social media profiles. I like painting when I can. I like baking. Visiting my parents isn't a hobby, but it is something that I try and do somewhat regularly. Just like hanging around New York, walking around, just like being able to just like sort of relax and unwind a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine you would want to do something other than read manuscripts, queries, and contracts all day, every day.
I think also maybe, I don't know, maybe it's an adult thing or maybe it's just a me thing. As I've gotten older, I've become much lazier. So my hobby is doing things that are very like lazy, that don't involve a lot of effort or planning. So sometimes people are like, oh, my hobbies are like horseback riding. I would never want to go out to wherever the horses are, like, and schedule training sessions and get helmets and lessons. It's too much. So the things that I like to do in my off time are things that I can sort of just do without much preparation.
Get yourself a copy of Red Dead Redemption 2. You can 5 minutes a day. You can ride a digital horse. Close enough.
I have that. Actually, I should say I have that. We have that, and then I get to watch what happens on it sometimes.
That's you should when you get a chance, try it out. It's fun.